Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meadsy69. Welcome back to the channel. Now today we are going to have an update video of the top 5 tanks that Wargaming should buff. Wargaming, please buff these tanks just for me, no one else, just for me. Now these 5 tanks, not all of them are bad tanks. Some of them actually used to be amazing, absolutely amazing, but you know, power crept and all that. Power creep is a thing in the game where all these good tanks keep coming into the game, either tech tree or premiums, that are just way better than these tanks, and they just get left behind. So the first one we're going to talk about is the T44. I love the T44, always have done. It's always been a fantastic tank, and back in the day this whole line used to be the most fun line in the game. You know, the T34, the T34-85, the T43, then you got the T44, the T54 and the T62, or the Object 140. It was the best line to grind in the game back then, because you had none of these overpowered premium tanks in tier 8, and you had no overpowered medium tanks. But obviously, because of power creep, these tanks are really just average, and I'd like to see these tanks come back. And I'm not saying the T44 is a bad tank. It's not a bad tank, but it's just fallen down the pecking order. And these tanks are unique into the game. You know, that they're what everyone started playing the game. You know, they're good. They used to be amazing, but now no one really plays the tanks because they're not that great. There's other tanks to play that are much better than these tanks. So why would you want to go and take out the T44? Now, the T44 used to be a tank. If you wanted to go and play tier 8, you could take the T44. Nowadays, you only ever play the T44 if you're grinding the line. And I don't like that. I don't like that. It is a shame, but you know, it is on that list that hoping one day Wargaming would buff. And that goes the same for this tank, the M46 Pattern. Again, if they've buffed tanks around it, and especially in tier 10, all the medium tanks in tier 10 that are all being buffed. Now, when you come up against these tanks from a tier 9 point of view, you're going to struggle, especially when Wargaming buffed almost all the tier 10 premium tanks, like the M48 Pattern, E50M, T62. They've all been buffed, but yet they leave the tier 9 variants. And yeah, the tier 9 things like the T54, you got the standard B, the E50, these are all solid tanks, but for me, this tank, the M46 Pattern, just falls behind. It doesn't really have anything going for it. Doesn't have a turret, doesn't have any armor, and it just struggles in the game. And I'd like to see Wargaming buff this. I don't know how. Maybe give it a bit more strong, a bit stronger turret. Who knows, but I'd like to see it buffed. Next up, and I can't remember how often I've been saying, or how many times I've said with this tank, the T28. In my opinion, it is still one of the worst tanks in the game. However, it has been buffed, but it's not enough. It needs, in my opinion, maybe more frontal armor than it has already got, or more speed. You know, it needs something, because at the minute, anyone can pen you like butter. It is a very, very slow tank, like a very slow tank. One of the slowest in tier 8s. And it's just boring, absolutely boring to play, and no one will ever play this tank unless they are grinding the E3. It does have a nice gun, however, so you do need to try. The only thing you could do is try and get into those positions where you can use that gun, because it is a nice gun. I do like the gun. I like the rate of fire, I like the reload, everything like that. The only things I don't like is the armor profile, the speed of the tank, and just how boring it is to actually play the tank. So I've said it so many times, buff the T28, make it worthy, you know, make people want to play it. Don't just buff tanks just for the fun of it, and that's still not good. They need to buff these tech tree tanks so people actually want to play them, because at the minute, almost, well, a lot of the tech tree tanks are just tanks to grind. You know, no one's going to go back to them. And again, this tank right here, back in the day, it used to be one of the best tanks in tier 7, and that is the Comet. It was brutal, it was deadly, dangerous, but now I love seeing a Comet on the enemy team because they're so easy to deal with. They're easy to deal with in my Smasher, they're easy to deal with in my Dracula, and they're easy to deal with in things like the Annihilator, the Type 62. They're just so easy to deal with. Doesn't have any armor, doesn't have any penetration, and Wargaming has sadly just left the tank, you know, and it is a shame because this, again, nostalgia going back a few 5-6 years, the Comet was so fun to play. It really was. If you could run double Comet, it was fun to play. Back in the day, like I said, the time when this was good, it used to be +2 -2 matchmaking as well. So getting this tank into tier 5 battles, it was great, but you can't have that no more. So the tank is just useless. It is useless. It still can perform, but for me, it's just not a fun tank to play. And there's no reason why I would pick this tank over any other tier 7 medium tank out there. It has the gun depression, it has nice gun depression, and you can get the odd bounce on your turret, but you can't rely on that at all. DPM is very nice, but other than that, it's a boring tank. And again, like the others, I would love for Wargaming to bring these tanks back. You know, bring them back so people don't just play them when they're grinding the line. Like things like the Tiger 2, the Tiger 1. People don't play them tanks to grind. They play them tanks because they're good tanks. They are good tanks in tier 7 and they're good tanks in tier 8. That is what you want in this game. You don't want everyone, otherwise everyone's just going to play premium tanks because they're better. Why would I play this when I've got a Dracula or a Type 62 or any other tier 7 premium tank for that matter? That leads me on to the Tortoise, and again, I want to love the Tortoise. I really want to love the Tortoise, but it should be a tank. It's known for its armor. It should be a heavily armored tank, but there's just so freaking many weak points on the tank. Now look at this. We have absolutely been ripped apart. We're going to hide behind this Yo here. We haven't bounced a single shot. We are now a one shot within a minute and a half. I hide behind him, and look, the STB can still get me because of that hatch. Wargaming, buff the hatch, please. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with any of these buffs that I want in the game? And let me know what tanks you want buffing. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Meadsy. Catch you soon.